you guys so much. Let's keep it going for everyone who's read. Man, I love this show. Thank you all for being here. This is just so cool. Okay. I've made plenty of mistakes, but the most memorable ones are the ones where I really should have known better, the ones where I violated one of my core values. I have only a small handful of core values. One of them is that I hate space. I find it aesthetically boring. There's simply too much of it, and I never wish to go there. Another one of my core values is that I never want to go on a game show. I have nothing against watching them, but I've always had the sense that my particular combination of excitability and people-pleasing would make participating a uniquely humiliating experience. But after a series of very particular mistakes, I violated that core value, and I became a contestant on Let's Make a Deal. The first mistake was a pretty big one. In that mistake, I auditioned for a game show. I was talked into it by my husband, Ben, who had signed up for this audition with his 3-person sketch group. This was a period of life when everyone we knew was in a 3-person sketch group. But one of the group members dropped out, and Ben asked me to fill in, and I had no good excuse. This was before I learned about the very good excuse of I don't want to. The game show was called Spellmageddon, and it was a show where you spell while they scare you. For my audition, they took me into a small office, and they did just that. I spelled psychiatrist while putting my hand in a box full of bugs. I spelled necessary while a live masked man who had been hiding in the room for the entire time popped out at me. Now, I'll brag for a moment. I'm very good at spelling, and I startle very easily, so I crushed this audition. When I left, people in the waiting room were asking where all that screaming had come from. The Spellmageddon people begged me to be a contestant, and I declined. The opportunity to win $10,000 before taxes did not seem even a little bit worth what I was sure would eventually lead to a moment of me peeing my pants in a panic on television while screaming out the letters inapplicable. I think back on my refusal proudly as a moment of holding a boundary. But unfortunately, my audition for Spellmageddon put me in the system. I was placed on a mailing list alerting me to other game show opportunities, and an opportunity to be in the audience of Let's Make a Deal coincided with 3 friends being in town, and once again, my husband, who is a good person but really does like a game show, convinced me to go. It'll be fine, I thought. I'll just try as hard as I can not to be picked as a contestant. So with this cautiously optimistic spirit, I showed up at Sunset Bronson Studios in Hollywood to begin the first part of the Let's Make a Deal experience, waiting in line. It was very hot. None of us were dressed for the weather. You see, an important element of Let's Make a Deal is that the audience wears costumes. And a good costume is part of how you entice Wayne Brady's producers to pick you to be a contestant. We were surrounded by some pretty elaborate ones. A man in front of us was covered from head to toe in cotton balls and had a headband with the number 9 on it. He was, of course, Cloud 9. And a woman behind us was dressed as a giant garbage can. Or more accurately, she had a giant trash can around her torso, and the trash can lid was her hat. And throughout our wait, she continually said the word trash to nobody in particular. It was like a catchphrase, or like if I Am Groot had a sister who was a trash can but left out the I am and only said trash. As a person who had not wanted to be here, I had not put any real effort into my costume. Thanks to all of our sketch groups, Ben and I had 5 wizard hats at home, so our costume was wizards. To complete the look, I found a cheap roll of blue fabric at Joann's and cut it into 5 pieces to make wizard cloaks. The fabric was fleece, yet another mistake, as it was 95 degrees out, and we were all wrapped in warm blankets like people who had just been rescued from an ice cave. I also wore a costume beard, because I had one, and it seemed a shame not to use it. The wait continued for hours. There was a wily energy as people got hotter and more impatient. Producers pre-screened the line for potential contestants. I overheard that the trash can woman and her crew had driven quite some distance to be here. She began saying trash more loudly, and I wondered if that might hurt her chances of being picked. After nearly 4 hours, we were let into the studio. Our phones were taken, and we were told to clap and cheer, because if we did a good job cheering, Wayne Brady might see us and pick us to be a contestant. I wanted not to cheer at all, but that seemed disrespectful, so I clapped and smiled, but didn't say, woo! As the show went on, I became more confident that I would not be chosen. I relaxed enough to make observations, like the fact that Wayne Brady was a great host, but never made eye contact with anyone. He looked not at the contestants, but just beyond them, as though he were a very lifelike animatronic. When the time came for the finale, I had completely relaxed. And then I heard Wayne Brady say, "Come on down to the wizard." I looked to my group, sure that he was summoning one of my other, more enthusiastic friends. Then I heard him clarify, "The one with the beard." And I knew it was me. And at that point, adrenaline took over, and I was completely swept away. Now, if you haven't seen Let's Make a Deal, the way the show works is you basically just repeatedly have to choose between two prizes. So my first choice was between a mystery box and a mystery envelope. I chose the mystery box, and I won a camera. Then when it was revealed that the envelope had been full of cash, I was disappointed. But the producers had warned us not to badmouth the prizes because they were all sponsored, so I expressed my disappointment by saying, "Well, I love cameras, but I love money more." Then I had the option to keep the camera or get the prize inside another little box. I went with my gut, I kept the camera, and then I got the option to trade the camera for a chance to pick whatever was behind doors number 1, 2, or 3. I obviously ditched the camera. I didn't want a camera. Who wants just a camera? I picked door number 2, the middle door, safe, classic. And behind door number 2 was a 5-day trip to Club Med in Ixtapa, Mexico. And at that point, I absolutely lost my shit. I jumped. I screamed. I don't believe I hugged Wayne Brady because he didn't seem to want that kind of intimacy, but I would have if it felt appropriate. It wasn't quite as humiliating as my vision of peeing my pants on the scary spelling show, but I definitely was not in control of my emotions or my body. I went back to my seat with my winnings. At that point, nobody was really cheering anymore because it was the end of the show and there were no more games to be chosen for, so the incentive was gone. The man dressed as Cloud9 hadn't been picked because despite the quality of his costume, it had been shedding cotton balls and they didn't want to get cotton on the set. Before leaving, I was escorted to a small windowless office where the adrenaline wore off as I waited for an hour to fill out tax paperwork. The room was beige, crowded with filing cabinets, and had a small drooping banner thumbtacked to the wall that said, "Congratulations." When I met back up with my group, we went out to eat. And we tried to celebrate my win, but there was a muted quality to the afternoon. We were tired, we were dehydrated, and we were sort of sad that the trash can woman hadn't been picked since she'd driven so far in hopes of getting lucky. I wanted to be lucky too, but not on a game show. I wanted to choose how I got to be lucky. And this was 12 years ago. Now that I'm older, I think it might be nice to be lucky at all, and I recognize that we rarely get to choose the form our luck takes if we get it. It's maybe better to be grateful for the trip to Ixtapa, Mexico, even if you did have to put on a beard and a blanket to get it. That being said, it is worth mentioning that I never took this trip to Mexico. I had to cancel it because my grandma died and they wouldn't rebook it. But I did still have to pay the taxes on it. So also, maybe my initial point of view on game shows was exactly correct. Thank you.